I used to kick myself at the times he would throw in my face that you were still in love with me and would rather me be with you than him. But I never felt that way at all. I felt you dodged a bullet when we broke up, but he was still always worried about the wrong thing and so insecure about my co-parenting with him. I didn't understand right away because I had never done anything to imply that something else was going on. On the contrary, I would text him while I was away and I would keep him in the loop of what we were doing. At times it felt like I was taking time away from them just to make him feel secure about me. But it wasn't always like that. No. At one point, they were amicable, which gave me hope that things would be okay. I met him when I was in my 20s. We hit it off right off the bat. He was a really sweet guy and came from a nice family. He was the only male in the family. He took care of business, and he was avidly trying to find his independence. I met him working at a hardware store. We both did, actually. We clicked and we started to hang out. I was immediately attracted to his vibe. He was so genuine, and his smile was so contagious. He lit up a room and not even realize it. I recall that smile so specifically because that's what got me. The day we met, he smiled so big, I could not help but smile back. He was always so easygoing and kind, so generous yet somehow reserved. How they go hand in hand, I have no idea, but that was him. He was younger than me by 2 years, but the way he carried himself, he was so mature and well put together. He had responsibilities and never complained about them. Instead, he went to work and took care of his shit just like a grown man should. Standing at about 5'10", maybe 11, he towered over me. I loved that about him. He was average, but somehow not so much. Some people would say he had golden retriever energy, but he had protective energies like a Roddy. No one is perfect, but in my eyes he was. I admired the way he cared about the people he loved and how loyal he was to them. I had never encountered something like this before, and I was amazed by it. With him, I felt that I had a lot of firsts. My first real relationship, my first live-in boyfriend, my first child, my first concert, my first real love. He was the first man to ask me out on a real date, and I have never forgotten that. In an era where dating wasn't really dating, a lot of guys at the time thought asking a girl to hang out was considered a date, but not to him. He liked to be proper, and that's what made him so distinguished. We shared a lot of the same interests: a love of coffee, dark chocolate, EDM, raves, dancing, gaming, and a love for family. We shared many similar views in life, and others we agreed to disagree. The conversations with him were never dull. Car ride sing-alongs were one of our favorite things to do. Who doesn't love jamming in the car with someone you vibe with? He never judged me even when I judged myself. We were young, but something about each other always made me feel like we knew each other long before we actually met. I recall our first kiss. It was during our first date. We went everywhere, but ended up near the beach, under the stars. We talked for hours and played like children, and eventually we kissed. I felt immediate sparks. He made me feel special, a way that nobody had ever made me feel before. We used to go on dates, and he would always get the same thing: cinnamon dolce latte. I had never tried it before until I was brave enough to try something new. I loved it. I introduced him to my world, and he introduced me to his. I met him when I was trying to find myself, and I wanted to know what real love was. At the time, I was getting over a bad breakup from years before, and somehow managed to drag on a lot longer than it did. Hung out with so many wild-ass people who were amazing friends at the time, but surely not the best influences. Even though he knew what era I was in, he stood by me. I made a lot of mistakes during that phase of my life, but in his eyes, I was amazing and he loved me. I was afraid of falling for someone and getting hurt the way I had in the past, but something about him always made me feel safe. Funny thing is, I still remember our first time. It was romantic. There was candles. We were next to a fireplace. This man sure knew how to make a moment memorable. The more the relationship progressed, the more I realized I wasn't going to be. The more the relationship progressed, the more I realized it wasn't going to be an easy life. We went through a lot of ups and downs. We tried and we fought so hard. But the attention of our relationship began to turn negative. People were in his ear telling him that we shouldn't be together. They almost succeeded at the time. The day I found out that I was pregnant was one of the scariest moments of my life. I remember I hadn't been feeling the best for weeks, so I went to the drugstore and got one before work. Truth be told, this was maybe not the best decision at the time, but I needed to know. Those lines did not lie. They revealed themselves pretty quickly. I cried. I sat in my car, bawled my eyes out, and went to work as if nothing happened. On my way, I called my friend and I asked her for her advice. She told me I needed to let him know because this was life-changing. The night I told him that I was pregnant, he told me that everyone agreed he and I shouldn't be together. While we were in the midst of breaking up over the phone, I had an anxiety attack. So I hung up the phone. My mom rushed into my room and asked me what was wrong. I couldn't breathe, so she held me. Something tells me my mom knew long before I did. So she asked me, ¿Estás embarazada, verdad? I nodded, and she held me tight. She told me everything would be okay. I was 22 years old, working 2 jobs, and I had just become a single mom. After a couple days, we talked again. We sat and he told me nobody liked me and his family disagreed with our relationship. He said throwing a child in the mix was simply not something that we should be doing. I was heartbroken. I felt like my world was shattering. And I wasn't just losing the person who made me believe in love again, but he insisted the only way things could work out was if I had an abortion. I heard him out, and he said he wasn't ready to be a dad. And I understood. I wasn't ready either. But I needed to know my options. I made some calls, and I made an appointment at the clinic. We made arrangements, and he offered to take me. The clinic was out of town in a nearby city. The car ride was silent. During the appointment, they took a urine test, and they did an ultrasound. I was told on this visit I was about 6 weeks along. The tech asked me if I wanted to see the baby, and I looked over at the screen. It was at that moment I knew what I wanted. I walked out of that office with the ultrasound in my hand, handed it to him, and told him I couldn't do what he asked me to. I offered him an out and told him he didn't have to be involved if he didn't want to. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't sacrifice my growing child for his happiness. We argued in the car. He drove to the nearby beach, and we continued to argue. Eventually, he asked me to get out the car, and he took off. I sat at this beach, alone, staring at the water, crying. I sat there questioning myself, asking if I was really making the right choice. I know I made the right choice. I wiped my tears from my face, called my sister, and I asked her to pick me up. It was like the universe was listening to me at this point, because unknowingly she was already heading in my direction. I told her what happened, and she was in disbelief. Eventually, he drove back. He asked me to get back in the car with him because he wanted to apologize for leaving me there. I told him I had a ride coming and I didn't want to talk anymore. Whenever I drove near that beach years later, I still remember the pain of that incident. It's like all the emotions come rushing back, and I'm still sitting at that beach debating my fate. For years, I dreaded driving past it, but when I moved to the area, I faced it, and at one point, returned there for another reason. After some time, we talked. He said he wouldn't let me go through this pregnancy alone. He decided he wanted to be a part of this child's life. I never denied him that. We agreed that we would continue our relationship and welcome our child together. He didn't want our child to come into the world with a broken family, and neither did I. We both came from single-parent households, and we didn't want that to be the narrative for our child. As the pregnancy progressed, the relationship did too. We talked more, worked on ourselves, and fortified our relationship. We were happy. Along the way, we had some hiccups. I got injured and eventually had to stop working. I had to be on bed rest and go to physical therapy. Suddenly, there were appointments on top of appointments. It was like I couldn't catch a break. I was exhausted, but he reminded me I could do this. Then, D-Day came. We were in bed. I remember I woke up out of dead sleep. My water broke. It was 3 in the morning and I had just gone to bed at 2. I was exhausted. We were rushed to the hospital, and after 18 hours of labor, our child was born. He was born healthy and gave us a scare, but he was finally here. And that was the most important thing to us. I had my mom with me every step of the way, and that brought me comfort. Months later, we lost ourselves. I was back at work. We took different shifts, just so one of us would always be with our child at all times. We would barely see each other. Our parenting styles were different. He would stress out easily, and I was just too patient. It got to the point where he would spend more time at work, and we didn't have much time together. He had friends at work who he would text daily. Those same friends eventually got to see our relationship fall apart, as they too were in his ear about us. A week before Thanksgiving, we had all gotten a cold. I was prepping the shopping list for caldo de pollo, or chicken soup. Out of nowhere, we began to argue about something so minimal. I went to the store and returned to cook. Once the soup was done and I was plating, I called out to him and I asked him if he wanted a bowl. He got up and said we couldn't do it anymore, and that was it. I didn't understand, and I still don't till this day. He said he was going to his old house and he would send for his things. I picked up my baby and handed him to my mom. And just so we could talk about having our little one see or hear about what was happening, I needed to make sure that he couldn't see it. That night, he walked out and went back home. For a week, we went back and forth. We still saw each other, and we went as far as going to his family's for Thanksgiving. I was welcomed with open arms, as was my child. We had Thanksgiving dinner together, kissed, and acted like a family. But I was surprised when he would later tell me that we were still broken up and that we weren't getting back together. For months, we continued the same thing, until one day I found out that he was sleeping with a girl from his job. The same one who I had been friends with. Later on, I would find out that he had a roster with these females who fake friended me for other reasons. This continued up until the point where he got a girlfriend at work. Based on the conversations that we had while sneaking around, I found out that she wanted him to get her pregnant because she fell in love with our child and wanted one also. Needless to say, that relationship didn't last, and we continued to go about our business and sneak around when we had to. Although we weren't exclusive, we were still making plans as a family and talking about giving our child a sibling. We agreed the 2-age gap would be perfect because we would not miss any of their milestones from our firstborn. We played with the idea by talking about scenarios and names, and that was that. We planned a weekend together to attend a concert. It was away from our location, but we were excited. The concert was the weekend after my birthday, and we would be seeing one of our favorite bands. He paid for the tickets and I paid for the hotel and the miscellaneous costs along the way. This would be our first road trip and our first concert, so I was excited. We ended up having so much fun that we ended up coming back with a surprise. About 6 weeks later, once again, I was sick. I assumed it was a cold because the weather had changed and I was always getting sick. It wasn't because of work, or it wasn't because of our child. Maybe they caught something at daycare, but it wasn't that. I ended up taking a pregnancy test just to rule it out. Since he and I were spending our days together, and he was staying over more often, he was over, and I told him that there may be a possibility. I was late, and the last time we went through this, I was pregnant. I took the test, and indeed I was pregnant. I remember I was standing in my kitchen, and he had me backed up against the kitchen sink. He went off on me. He started telling me that this was a mistake, and that I was trying to trap him. Luckily, my landlord was coming over to pick up the rent. And when he saw him, he left. I was crying when I opened that door for my landlord. All my landlord did was ask if I was okay. All I could do was nod. Again, I was in a similar situation as I was before. He was angry and seemingly being awful to me. Again, I was in a similar situation as I was before. He was angry and seeming being awful to me. We had talked about how much we both wanted to give our child a sibling. Could it have been bad timing? I don't know. It seemed like the same pattern was about to begin. Only this time he continued to go back and forth with me. Up until the point where he moved away. I was pregnant. I was going to my appointments alone. and I had to deal with the complications of this pregnancy also. I once again had the support of my mom, who stood by my side, and some amazing friends. They never let me down, and they always reminded me of my strength. I would travel up to visit with him when he moved away. I was super pregnant, and we still played house. But he was single as ever, though, because when I would leave, someone else would come over. I remember I called him out on it, and he never really owned up to it. I went through this pregnancy anyway, and I held my head up high. I had a few false labor calls and ended up once again having to take it. Super easy because the stress of being a single parent and the back and forth just kept messing with me. On D-Day, I didn't even realize I was having contractions. I just knew that I was very uncomfortable. The day I called my mommy friend who had her child weeks before, I explained to her what I was feeling. She urged me to go because she said it sounded like labor. I went about my day, grabbed some food, and then headed to the hospital on my own. I remember driving myself across town to that hospital. I was fine, but out of nowhere the contractions got intense. I was indeed in labor. I pulled up to the parking lot and got out of the car. Walking midway through that parking structure, I buckled and the pains grew stronger. Between contractions, I made my way up to labor and delivery, and once examined, I was informed that I was about 7 centimeters dilated and needed to be admitted. I called my mom, my best friends, the Davenports, and I called him. He declined to be there when our son was born. Luckily, I was showered with support from my mom and my friends. They got to witness the miracle of life and see the most embarrassing thing happen as well. It's a laugh till this day. After our second child was born, he decided he would see him a day later or so. Looking back at that relationship and this last one, there were so many similarities. You see, he was like cinnamon. He was sweet in the beginning, but with a twist. And my ex, so vanilla. He looked sweet and harmless, but completely the opposite. They both put me in a situation where things got out of hand. We went back and forth, snuck around behind people's backs, and with vanilla, I was almost coerced to also get an abortion, but I didn't. Same patterns, two separate individuals. I fell in love hard with both of these individuals. I wouldn't get hurt, or so I thought. I fell in love hard with both of these individuals, thinking I wouldn't get hurt, but I did. One being more emotional than physical. I don't place all the blame on them because I should have recognized it at the time, but I didn't. I wanted to be happy, have the family that I always dreamed of, and I had it both times. Both times, it didn't work. Like my second pregnancy and my latest pregnancy, I dealt with it alone. Even though he was home, he was absent and paid little to no attention to me, as if he wasn't there. I went to my appointments alone, and I had to deal with my aches and pains alone. I dealt with tests completely alone, and solely had the support of my best friend, who made it her goal to make sure that I had everything I needed. After delivery, like my second and my last, the recovery was on my own. I had to make sure that I could care for my littles and that I could take care of my newborn and myself. I had to make sure I could take care of my littles and still take care of my newborn. Not even 2 days later, upon release, I was up and about post C-section, which was not an easy recovery. Getting up on your own is difficult and requires assistance. Even though I wanted the support of my partner each time, I had the support of people who loved me and kept checking up on me. My family who literally always found a way to check up on me and went as far as traveling hundreds of miles to care for me. Sisters of mine, if you're listening, thank you. Thank you for always being my support system and reminding me that I am strong. The same sisters who stood up for me in my time of need and got this man out of my house when he tried to hurt me. And to my brother-in-law, who also came to my rescue when I couldn't walk or stand due to the pain from surgery. I love you all for supporting me when I needed it and encouraging me to speak my truth. Although I have been through so much bullshit, I realized I played a part in a lesson that took me all too long to learn. I was a pendeja until the moment I said enough. I understand. The cues were there, but at that moment, you don't see them. You go through life wondering what went wrong, and most people don't look back at their faults. I do, but I didn't always. Cinnamon Dolce, and it didn't work out. But he is an amazing father, and I will always be grateful for him because he stepped up. I promise you, there's more to him than what really happened.